I'm a survivor of the Triple T industry. They're a loosely regulated network of wilderness therapy programs, residential boarding schools, conversion therapy camps historically that state that institutional placement is the solution for families who are at crisis. These programs are about a $23 billion a year empire. They'll start marketing saying, we can get your kids off their phones and we can put them into these programs and it'll force them to communicate, right? 450 kids have died in these programs and 220,000 children are sent in every single year. And many of them start by being kidnapped from their bedroom.
Leaning closer. Your story, Mike and Scott. Let's talk.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the What's Your Story podcast. I'm Scott Leese, here with my good friend and co-host, Mike Lindstrom.
Boom.
And we are breaking ground here today on the What's Your Story podcast. Mike, we're talking to our first professor. Super interesting guy. He actually has a little bit of background in sales as well, and a really unique, interesting story. I don't know if you know this. I guest lectured at his classes.
This is the one where I picked you up when you were in town.
Yeah, well, you couldn't really find me. That's a whole other story.
Sure.
But so we welcome to the show Professor Jon McQueen, professor of sociology here at Arizona State, right down the road in Tempe, Arizona. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, it was great having you come guest lecture. And I know my students are still to this day talking about it.
How about that?
Yeah.
Oh, you left
maybe-
the mark.
You have
maybe
a
I'll-
second career if you want.
left
Maybe
the
I'll
mark?
come back.
You
I love it.
should.
Maybe I'll come back. Maybe Mike can come teach.
Be a double
that
guest
lesson.
lecture.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Actually,
Well, we start off every show by asking our guests, what's your story? Who you are, how you got here, how you decided to study sociology, and your professor, you talk a lot about masculinity and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
what's your story, Jon?
Yeah, you kind of touched on the beginning of it. So I grew up as a son of a marketer. My dad was a market researcher for Leo Burnett. He grew up very poor, and that was his way to figure out how to climb forward. So when I got to college, I originally wanted to be a social worker. I wanted to hear problems, hear people's issues, and help people with things. I took a class that then led me to believe, yeah, that's not for me. Transferred, actually, ends up being that story you could tell later. My wife, who's a little bit younger than I, was going to a different college. And so I transferred to U of A, even though I lecture at ASU. I'm a alma mater of U of A, which I guess is dangerous.
We'll let that slide.
Yeah, we'll let it
I
slide.
know. I wear my keys still that have it, and the students always start, how dare you? I'm like, no, they had to hire me so you could get better education.
I see what he
man,
did
it's
there.
already early on.
You
good.
have
Good.
to.
That's
But
good.
so I got that degree in sociology, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. And that's when you bring up that I used to be in sales, is the world that I knew was marketing. The new world that I knew was sales. And I started as account executive, BDR, SOA, SDR, all the names have changed over the years.
Yeah.
I loved it. I've always loved sales. I love the interaction. My dad used to say there's a salesman and there is a trusted advisor. And when I would sell or when I'd work with clients, I always wanted to figure out their need, their pain point, all that stuff, but also build into the capacity of understanding who they are culturally, personally, socially. Right before COVID hit and we all went into lockdown, my wife had decided to shift away. We were both in that field of sales and marketing. And at that time, I had gone from being in a SOA, BDR, to account executive, to figuring out what I wanted to do. I was at Realtor.com at that time. It was right around this area. And I just thought I wanted to go more towards what I'd seen, son following father. And I ended up joining a marketing company. And right before COVID hit, I had moved into being a director of research and business development. And so my wife said to me, well, you've always thought about maybe getting more education? And I was like, yeah, I don't really know if I need it though. I'm making good money. I've gotten into being a director before 30. Why would I do that? She was like, well, none of us are doing anything. And she was going back for her master's in architecture. And so ASU had an opportunity to take a master's degree online, and I had to fight I have to go to ASU. But my department, it was very inexpensive, surprisingly, at the time. And it became something that my company was willing to fund to have someone with more advanced degrees. So I was just like, okay. I went back and I did well. And there's something that I always tell my students, if you don't ask, the question remains no. right? So best thing you can do is try to inquire, get an understanding. And I had always in every discussion board put a story that one day I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to teach this that I found interesting once I'd finished with it. 3 days after I graduated with my master's degree, I got a text message from one of the people who had been my mentor. Her name's Marcella. She had asked me, would you be willing to teach a class of 443 students? And I'm like, okay, sure. Before that,
From 0 to 443.
yeah, right. And the better part of that is, and this is why I was telling my students, you don't walk on fire till you just can't. Before that, I'd done a lot of presentations at Qualtrics conferences and things like this, but it didn't feel the same as public speaking. They felt like I had the repertoire of being able to follow exactly to my list, and no one was going to judge me if I was staring at note cards, right? So I'd listed public speaking as probably one of my bigger fears. I was one of those people who fell into the camp of public speaking and then death, right? But my wife looked at me and she's like, when are you going to get this shot again? Because those discussion boards, I'd always said that, and that's where she had seen me saying that I always wanted to do this. And I said this thinking once I'm done, I'm not somebody who I think can ever retire. Working keeps my brain working, and my brain's working, I feel, at the healthiest. So fear to me is having nothing to do. So I took it, started lecturing, but prior to getting to ASU and doing my job that I do now, I got a text message and a call from another one of my colleagues who I'd never heard of in my life. She was the associate director of the entire Stanford school at the time. And she was like, hey, I heard you said you'd teach Rick's class. And I was like, yes, person I've never talked to. I said, I would. You want 2 more? And I'm like, so you want to give me 1,400 students to teach after just finishing my degree? They're like, yeah. And I was just like, okay, let's see how this goes. That situation fomented me and solidified me being here at ASU.
Yeah.
So I don't know how familiar you are with the semantics of college, but you've likely heard of the concept of an adjunct professor.
Yeah.
Right. They're not faculty. They're just like vagabond professors is what the joke is. They'll jump between all these different colleges to be able to make...
It's like a traveling nurse type situation.
Yes. Yeah. It's how you make your money.
Right.
You'll be working all these places and you're hoping someone will bring you in.
Right.
But because I was going to be teaching 3 classes as opposed to 2 classes, they had to make me full faculty because an adjunct can only teach 2 at a time. And so in my mind, in the salesman that's still in me, I'm like, I'm in the door.
Yeah, you hacked the system.
I hacked the system. I got in without having to go through the academic job market so scrupulously, right?
Yeah.
Got there. The minute I started teaching, I wanted more. To me, this idea of just settling down didn't make sense because I had been in that hustle culture. So I was like, I want to teach social deviance, which became a staple class of mine that so many students started taking. That put me to 4. By 2 semesters of then, I started teaching 7 classes a semester because it just sounded interesting to me to keep learning. I'm in this space where I can never stop learning. I'm a combination of 2 different worlds because I had been totally socialized in the corporate America. I view everything, there's that old concept, anyone can do sales, but I do believe in the idea of people who are born to do sales that look at how to solve problems. And so I started pitching my classes mid-classes. I started having the highest enrollments, at least in my department, by my first year there, and they would ask me why. And I'd be like, are you not pitching your classes? But then I started realizing I wanted to look into different research. So I just got back from Stanford University. I was doing a presentation at the Sociological Science 3rd Annual Conference where I was presenting one of my research topics, trappings of trust. What I do more specifically, since this is what's my story, is I'm a survivor of the Triple T industry. Are either of you familiar with that programs?
No.
So they're a loosely regulated network of congregate care systems that state that institutional placement is the solution for families who are at crisis. These programs are about a $23 billion a year empire. They are run through wilderness therapy programs, residential boarding schools, conversion therapy camps historically, and they provide families these, what I posed at Stanford, which are trappings of trust. You may have heard of things like Paris Hilton speaking about them. You may have seen that there have been Netflix documentaries called The Program. These systems, through what I'm coining this moral digital architecture. Families who are facing crisis go to these websites that, this will be interesting for your past, are not SEO or SEM optimized. They are made to make sense to a family in crisis. If someone who is not facing crisis would look at it, it's not.
And they move right on.
Yeah. It's like images of like, if it's religion-based, which some of them are, they'll have a centering to God, a restorative child, a balancing of soul, or if it's a secular program, it'll talk about strength and community and being seen, and they'll say or promote the right that they can solve anything from autism to sexual deviancy to phone addiction is one of the things they'll put on there now. So it's like a one catch-all. Very much, when I was at Stanford, they said to me, what's the difference between this and internet scam?
What was the addiction you said?
Internet addiction, just like leaving the socialization. They'll start marketing they have saying that we will, since some of their programs are wilderness therapy, we can get your kids off their phones and we can put them into these programs and it will force them to communicate, right? 450 kids have died in these programs and 220,000 children are sent in every single year. And many of them start by being kidnapped from their bedroom.
Wow. You went through this, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And do you see some of the work that you do in teaching the courses that you do as advocacy in a way?
Yes, between the research I'm writing and the courses that I'm teaching, I'm given this unique opportunity to have this fall, speaking of You Should Come lecture, I'm going to have 1,900 students. I'm having one of the biggest cohorts I've ever had. So I have this large audience of youth who are looking to learn and understand. And I always at least designate one segment where I don't want to make it about me, but there's this old Churchill quote, right? It's like 1 death's a tragedy, 10,000's just a statistic. And it looks to the idea of when you hear about these terrible things happening in this large scale, it's like, well, what am I going to do about it, right? So I try to teach them with applied reasoning. So yeah, I use this as a way to enlighten them about it, but I'm also not trying to shove it down their throat. So in many cases, part of my research that differs than some of the advocacy groups like Unsilenced, which is a huge, amazing organization, is I think that the families are constantly the ones who are being manipulated because these programs cost $5,000 to $30,000 a month for families. They take insurance. That's how they're able to be loosely regulated. But they also, which is dystopianly problematic, do not have any barriers between socioeconomic class, meaning families with less income and poverty are also in them, as well as the famous Paris Hiltons, and they're all in the same program. And even in the carceral system, you have the joke of rich prisons versus poor prisons, right? So it seems to be this function where it's profit over everything. So I get to talk about this stuff. I got to talk about it at Stanford. I get to write about it. And then I get to also learn from the youth how well they know about these things.
And I imagine this must be a hot button topic. Sure, you're selling, as you said, selling to get more enrollment in your classes, but you've got 1,900 students rolling through. There must be a reason why so many people are wanting to learn more about this thing.
Yeah, I mean, so my topic, going off of that, is a topic that I talk about. The courses that I teach are very expansive. I teach everything from introductory sociology all the way up. I mean, I can list, it's about 9 classes: intro, deviance, methods, men and masculinity, dating, relationships, and marriage, and so forth. I just kept taking more and more classes because I'm like, I can be able to work with students. And it's been one of the beautiful things to me that I've seen is that a lot of times students go through ASU or college. I don't know if either of you had this experience where they never hear from their professors. Their professors just assign it to a TA, or they stop communicating. They get one email, if even, the entire semester.
I went to a small school, so I didn't have to deal with that.
I was a poli-sci major at UCSD, and one thing I do liked about UCSD at the time is the professors were very hands-on, but I know that's very, very different. I have friends that have kids that are now, that they tell me the same exact story. They literally, professor will lecture, gone. So is the grad student or whomever is taking over at that point.
Yeah. So when I was teaching deviance, this must have been 3 years ago, I used to like to end classes by saying, let's have a hot take day. We're in a class that's defined by non-normative, interactive, and behavior. Let's flip the roles. Don't manage your impression in a way where you're trying to seem like this studious student. Like, let's talk. That's always been cool. I've always had some interesting conversations, but I had this student who rose her hand in the back of the classroom, and she had been somewhat active student, but not the person who's sitting up front with their hand up every day. And so you never know whose life you're touching in a position like this, where you're able to work with students from such different backgrounds. And she had been at Arizona State University for 7 years, on and off. She had to take some breaks. And she said that this graduation cycle, which she was going to be a part of, has now become bittersweet for her. And I was like, that's an interesting take. Why do you say that? And she was like, well, my first year, I was lucky enough to have some really driven and passionate professors who made me feel like I made the right choice to be in college. I was studying things I cared about. I felt connected to the university, and I wanted to be a part of this Sun Devil Nation, right? And I'm like, okay. And she's like, and then this is the last semester I've ever felt that again. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, you come to class and it doesn't seem like whatever's going on in your life, you come to class and turn it off and then start talking about the material, and you engage with us and you make us feel seen. And I have one other professor this semester who's doing that, but I've always felt like when I'm here, I get to learn, I get to engage. And so for the first time, I feel like I want to learn again. She's like, in a few weeks, I'm going to put my cap and gown on and leave. And this is the last time that I've felt connected again. And that kind of has stayed with me throughout my time teaching at ASU. Is it is not that hard for me, and I have a lot of students, but it's not that hard for me to try to remember that these students are also needing someone to do more than just give you a syllabus, to give you more than just here's what you need to learn.
So could you interpret that to mean the role that you're in teaching classes has changed and evolved and continues to change and evolve?
I think so. There's a big fear right now, as I'm sure you had someone bring up something in AI in this generation, that there's a lot of disconnection between the learning capacities.
We hear all the time people are going through university and they haven't written one paper themselves. Or had any original thought on their own, and they're still graduating, right?
Had the computer and it said, thank you, ChatGPT, I got through this degree, right?
Right, yeah. So the nature of what you're doing is
that's the question on it, right?
Changing, yeah.
There are ways to start this conversation. There are ways to discuss this in these rooms. While teaching is evolving, we need to evolve with it. You can look back to either it was Socrates or it was Plato, I can't remember which in this moment, but said that when we begin to read and write, we will become stupid because we will stop listening to the person, to the orator, that idea of latching onto thoughts at that time. This is the same thing respun. We're sitting here with a tool that, yes, it can be used for innovation in ways that is absolutely full of nefarious intention, or it can build this mental atrophy and this prisoner's dilemma, right? The biggest thing that scares me, and I talk a lot about this when we talk about evolution of teaching, is who's going to be punished in a way that is able to be seen in a classroom. Is the student who is studiously studying and just doesn't get the material. They're studying, they're coming to office hours, they just aren't getting it, but they choose through their own belief in self-betterment, I'm not going to use AI, I'm going to push through this, I'm going to write that paper, take that test, whatever it may be, and they get a B, let's say. And then let's just say the prototypical person who smells like maybe some Coors Light, they're sitting in the lecture hall, they're having too much fun in college, 15 minutes before, took my exact prompt, ran it through AI, met all the measures of the prompt, so I'm reading it, it sounds fine, it hit all the points, I'm a little worried that it might have been AI, but not enough to be able to raise a flag, gets an A. Well, that student just got a B, and they put their whole effort into it. Prisoner's dilemma, it's not a better situation. Next, when are they going to stop hurting their GPA and decide, you know what, I'm just going to use AI? And every time we make that decision, it's just like you like to talk about sales tied to addiction type mentality. It fills the need, and then it becomes the next step. It's the next step. The first time we'll be like, I'll do it once. Well, that's the first email you send. It's the first text you send. And then it becomes the next paper you write. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to make sure I still do my readings. You stop doing your readings, right? And you're going to build a foundation without any stepping stones of how you got there.
How do you monitor? I've been fascinated by this. My kids go to a private school, and they're very good at communicating with the parents about how they manage AI. How do you all do it?
Each professor, each department and division has what they can place into it. But the glass ceiling mentality is we put what we expect in our syllabus. There are AI tools that we can use to look for patterns of large language modeling. But I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of irrationality, of rationality. And we use AI detectors to detect AI. And that same algorithm flares up for anything like Google Translate. It flares up for anything that has LLM structures into it, which is pretty much a lot of generative things that are used for both learning differences and assistive of language. So I will go in and I'll look for language patterns. I've built bots that I know how to use that can look for certain code structures, but a lot of it is left to the instructor to figure out how do I approach this. I've done things like an intro class at the early years. There's also just like bad cheating when someone hasn't learned. There's the old joke that was like, at least if you're going to cheat,
don't get caught.
Or that you could dumbly bumble around and learn something when you were bumping between the websites of Course Hero and even further back to the library stacks, right? And now the kids submit their exam with 2 minutes for a 65 question exam. I'm like,
wow,
impossible, first off. So let's say they did it liberally at 10 minutes. I'll email them when I have that accusation of that definitely not possible, even if you're a super fast test taker. And I'll be like, I'll give you an option. Either you admit to me that you did AI and I'm going to knock 20% off and give you a chance to take it by yourself in a controlled environment where I can watch. Or I have a really great answer for you. You can put it all on the line. You can come to my office tomorrow and I'll give you exactly 10 minutes to take the exact exam with me over your shoulder.
Wow.
No questions asked.
What do people pick?
They've never picked that one. Many times they just go, I'm going to take the 20 off.
Yeah.
I'm like, smart, right? I'm waiting for the person, though. I'm waiting for the person to just prove me wrong, because then I'll have another side of that story. Be like,
it's such a hard thing, though. We use AI in so many different ways, but I know there's ways to catch certain things with language patterns, but it's something as simple as, hey, you're going to do a biography on Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Okay. The facts are the facts. Everyone knows when he was born, when he was shot. You're going to put it in there. You're going to get it, copy, paste it in Word, fluff it up a little bit, and you turn it in.
Yep.
That's what people do. I mean, back in the day, I don't know about you, man, but at UCSD, my fraternity, we had a fraternity file.
Yeah, I know about those.
Yeah. We would literally, I remember in poli sci,
I didn't have that. I went to the wrong school.
We had a bunch of poli sci majors, and they're like, oh yeah, Professor Roeder, he's going to ask you the same question. We got the thing on Russia in the files. Just copy it. We would literally copy it.
Man.
That's a Greek class.
Copy it.
Yeah, this is like a known thing that every fraternal house has. Like, there are the people who teach WPKR, our business school. You have to take, it's like a part of the agreement why we have these 1,900 students, because this fall I'm teaching a predominantly high amount of intros to help the department.
Because everybody has to go through
Yeah,
that.
you have to go through it. And it's seen that they see that as more useful in learning social, cultural patterns. I've heard y'all talk about in your podcast the way that culture is a part of this. It's smart if they decide to listen to the applied part. But yeah, I know that the frat houses have lists of my exams, and it's supposed to charge me to then change it, and I do change it all the time. Benefits, like you mentioned, that AI exists. It also allows me to spin ideas faster than ever before, and I can change things in a heartbeat of how I want to construct questions and design them, and then do whatever you should always do.
I feel like you got to stay a little bit ahead of the people.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to figure it out, and you're like, I got to stay one step ahead.
One of my favorite classes is to teach technology in society, because being able to work with these students and show them how much the Foucauldian concept of biopower, that there's not this sovereign king, there is these small, gentle nudges that are putting you into positions, and that there are those who are given certain ways to speak, but there are those ways that we fall in. And I'll be like, how many of you paid attention to your health now that you have an Apple Watch? One big conversation that came out recently is a lot of Gen Alpha and the younger Gen Z can't read analog clocks. And so I brought it up to them. And they can't, but that's the social construction of technology. No,
Can't read a clock?
they can't. So New York broke this post, and there's a big TikTok movement of going up and asking kids, what time is it? And they just, but that's where it goes into the concept of the social construction of technology.
Funny, I never even thought about that.
That it's the way that we view and interact with technology is decided by us, but also understood through how we are in this position. For the majority of folks, everything's digital now, right? It just has the time being there. And so I asked my students, and a lot of them, which was really cool to hear, was they're like, yeah, I had to switch my phone back to having analog because I stopped having the practice in doing that. And that's where I was going back with AI, is when you use AI to do everything, you lose the skill to do anything. Right. And so as they are allowing this massively computing, just predictive language, because that's what it is. It's not creating something new. It's predicting possible responses based upon your prompt to write for you. That's all you're doing. And if you decide to have a conversation, you write a beautiful paper. Let's say I pull you in, not to call you an AI user, but to be like, wow, Mike, you wrote an amazing paper. Can you tell me about it? I really want to see how you thought of this. And you're just going to like, the words just came to me.
Yeah, right.
Do you feel like there should be more academics in business, or more business people moving towards
Good question, Scott.
academia?
I love that question. I get a lot of conversations with one of my former colleagues, Eric. He's now at Occidental University. Me and him work in the trenches together. We both taught all the intros and all the classes and everything. So we ended up being very close. He would ask me the same question of how do I fill my classes so well? Or I'd be getting lunch with someone who's substantially more tenure and in a position of sovereignty. And I would just say, one, I ask, right? Like, or I just promote it. And he just couldn't see how to do that because that's not really ingrained into a lot of academic.
That's a skill you got from.
Yeah, I got it from my former life.
Yeah.
So in medicine, a lot of the times, you can't practice certain classes that have to do with death unless you've seen death, because it's supposed to be something you can't just theoretically talk about. You have to have experienced it, right? And I know you have a JD, so you went through law school, yeah? This idea that it's the practice of law because you're never finished learning, right? You have to always be learning. And I think that academia needs to treat more things in the way that the Juris Doctorate does, which is that we should never be this like, I've now mastered my craft. If you've mastered your craft, you're done. And so I think that would be interesting to see more corporate folk come into academia.
Well, it seems like there's an appetite, at least right now, for corporate folks going into academia and guest lecturing, taking adjunct professor roles and whatnot. But seems to be less appetite for people in academia going into
yes and
private
no.
world.
One of my friends, Jen, so she just got to the point where she was done with the academic involvement. Different things, different reasons. She has very good reasons to have walked away. But she also went into X. And that was because a lot of companies are looking into bringing academics to understand when we're going into this age of AI, there is a necessity of understanding cultural engagement and how the actual interaction on these platforms matters and how you're going to position, build, and construct it to be able to engage with different backgrounds. And so she's found herself in a fairly well-paying.
That's great. I think it's important for people in academia who maybe they feel scared or threatened about where the state of education is right now, and they're not sure what's going to happen with their profession or whatnot, that there's alternatives.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it.
Did you have a lot of adjuncts?
I did not. Again, I went to a really small school, so.
I just feel like at law school we had adjuncts. That was very normal. We'd have an entertainment attorney coming down from LA every Monday night from 6 to 9 was your lecture. And you learned a ton. This is a real person doing the real thing. You're not hearing about a textbook thing. So I am curious about that other part of it too, like how many people are using both parts of the acumen. But I don't know, personally, I learned more from having a real life business person. So the fact that you have the background that you have and you bring that in, people know that about you too, by the way. It's part of your lecturing.
Yep.
Hey, by the way, let me tell you a little bit how this came to be.
Oh yeah, I have a literal slide in my first day of day. So
it's important though.
You learn what you need to put out there through practice, trial and error. We all learn our faults, right? So one, I'm a fast talker, right? From Chicago, I just blame that. And then if you don't like anecdotes, I'm not the professor for you. And then I have another one that goes, when I get lecturing and if I really want to hit points, I'm not going to limit how I speak. And so that tends to come with vulgarity. And it's just
You're pre-qualifying everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly what
So
I do.
you're talking about cussing. Basically.
Yeah. I'll just I get into it. They
okay with it, right?
They like it. It's risky. They're like, oh, but then I've had a review once from a Christian student And by all means, I get it. They have the right to the space that they paid for. Right?
Yeah.
And who was like, Professor McQueen used a lot of profanity in the lectures, and I felt that was offensive. And I'm like,
You were warned.
that was before I had that in my warning. So once
that's
now
a-
that
now you got
that's
it.
why I
Now
have
you got it.
customer
Now you got it.
feedback, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
But they still have those back at UCSD. It was a book you bought. It was like $50, and it was the professor's review. The classes was 60% the midterm, but you got rated. Like if we had, I won't say his name. He's still around, I believe. It was a calculus class. This guy had a 7%.
my goodness.
7%. But at certain colleges, you had 5 colleges that back then at UCSD, you had to take it. So it didn't matter. Like you had to go through this dude's class, and I had to take it. But it's
been digitized now. Now it's RateMyProfessor.com, and that is the student side facing window. And a lot of profs don't like looking at theirs because they
Oh,
see,
that's what I was going to ask you. Do you, do you
sure.
care about that or not?
Do I? So no, I don't care about it. Think the best way to put this. So I had a very, very short stint with Zocdoc, and Zocdoc was the one who trained me on how I sold. And they had a pretty famous training process, but I got unlucky and got where they first launched. And so I got pretty much handed to the doctors who were sick of talking to us. And I have never had that experience again of being reamed out and medically told how I could do things to myself. Right. And it taught me one of my most valuable lessons of how you approach sales. I always tell the students, I had this one plastic surgeon who was just killing it and was doing the whole I don't need you. And so I eventually realized, well, I know we have patients who need him. I'm like, how much is it worth to you to not talk to me for a year? And ended up closing him on that deal alone. I'm like, I already knew he knew everything he
Great
needed.
question.
That is a great
great
question. Great question.
That was the problem.
Yeah.
You know, I
Told you
broke through
things
your
you could do
gatekeeper
yourself.
every
You like
day.
the wording of that?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. I'm borrowing that.
I'm like, I can get through your gatekeeper every day. I could make this a double call. Or
I like that. How much is it worth to you for me to not call you anymore?
exactly.
That's great.
I bring my knowledge through anecdotes. And I look at my Rate My Professor as the way to see and govern what they've said. I had a student say in one of my course evaluations, McQueen's class was so boring that it made me join the ROTC. I am not getting drafted. I am needed now. But
That's funny.
it is funny. I love that.
That's pretty good.
But I'm
pretty good.
I'm face to
brutal,
face. I'm
though.
like,
It's
you're
pretty
not,
brutal, but it's pretty
you're
funny.
not going to break me with your mean comments. I have had the worst. I've been very fortunate that at least on my public facing profile, the Rate My Professor, that students have rated me 200 or something reviews doing for 5 years, which is a lot. I have a lot of students, and they've been very honest. People who were unhappy with what I said, they told me what they didn't like. And I started telling students, I'm like, tell me what doesn't work. Because lecturing at you, if you're miserable, is just as crappy for me.
Yeah.
So I use a lot, like you're saying, I bring in anecdotes, I bring in examples, I talk about things that I experienced. And a lot of the students have told me that ended up being why they then took all my other classes is I will talk about my sales and my marketing background in there, especially because WP Carey, which, as you mentioned, they bring in people who are working in the field. They bring in people who are CEOs, CMOs. They bring in the average account folks who have had high books to be able to show the students like what business is going to be like, not just like I've been behind the ivory tower. This is the best economic theory. This will get you through. No, wait till you get to the cold calling 300 calls a day. See how
I got another one you can add to your
Yeah.
pre-frame slide. Right up front at the first lecture, you say, by the way, I know my score already. It's a 9.1. So whatever you put on the slide, I'm telling you, I've done this in my speaking events. I tell them right up front, I know you're going to rate me at the end of this keynote, 0 to 10 scale. I already know my number, 9.1. But 1 out of 10 of you don't like my bald head. I was told, I reminded somebody of their ex-husband. I can't do anything about that. But if you put your number up there, watch what happens. You're going to get the same exact number that you tell them because you pray for them because you told them so.
That's a good point.
Try it out.
I will
great.
try
It's
that
a
out.
sales technique.
That's a good one.
Well, before we get out of here, what do you have coming up? What do you want to talk about that you're looking forward to this summer or
Yeah.
next semester or
This
whatnot?
next semester, I have a lot of my intro classes, which is, if you need it, take it. I am building more and more research towards the troubled teen industry. As I said, as you mentioned, I'm a survivor of it. And I think that sociology through public institutions, through the research that I will be presenting, will help bring at least some ways that this can be brought to better regulation and hopefully not hurt so many folks and young families, especially families who are seeking help when they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that through research, through awareness, and through publications, that when there are court cases, which there have been, they always seek the deference of where's the expertise coming from, and I'm hoping to build that. So I have a paper coming up about institutional trust brokerage that I will be submitting for publication soon, and then my trappings of trust paper. And I just really am hoping that more and more I'll be able to build more information on that. And then long-term spring, if anyone wants to take Men Masculinity, that is available in spring. So
I think that's an important topic. I'm glad you brought that up at the end because I think that's such a necessary topic
it is.
that people are afraid to talk about. I mean, it's okay to talk about feminism, which is great. There was a time in our country where we didn't talk about that at all, and we've earned the right, and we're doing a good job of that. But when it comes to masculinity, there's toxic masculinity. There's all that you have too much of this, too much. So guys just avoid it. I've had events where people ask me point blank in an event. I'm like, that's a question I'll take offline because I'm gonna get rated anyway. Hopefully it's gonna be a 9.1. But as soon as I start opening up that can at a corporate event, people are like, whoa, where's Lindstrom going with this? Where are you going with this? You got half that audience is female, but the other half that audience is male that says, let's hear what he has to say about this. I think it's an important topic that people have to understand.
I could talk for the rest of your day on masculinity. It's a topic I'm so passionate about. I taught it as a passion project. I had to pitch my school to let me teach it. It is constantly being battled if it's going to be even offered, which is sad to me.
I believe it.
Because it's important. But I can tell you one crazy statistic for that, 80-20. Pareto's law just maintains its annoyingly dominant.
Wow.
Can't get away from it.
No.
Yeah, right? Never. 20% men will take it. Men won't take men and masculinity. And the ones who do have been just an amazing experience. And the other side of the misandrist structure, I've seen a lot of women who come into class expecting this to be like ragging on men. And I'm like, this is not going to go that way. Nor am I going to allow men to have the ability to create a space where they can just like bro talk, Discord talk. The approach that I use is called multiple masculinities. It approaches masculinity from a stance that it is not some monolithic structure. You mentioned that people have the conversation around toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity, to me, is a very viscerally negative word because it incorporates all forms of masculinity as being toxic. There are so many types of masculinity. And the problem is, if you go look up the word masculinity, you go look up the word manliness or man, right? It's tautological. It's a circle. It'll say masculinity is defined by being a man is defined by being masculine. So when a lot of young folk, young men, are seeking understanding, there's a really cool quote by one of my favorite theorists that goes, masculinity is defined by a series of knots. And I want you to think about as men, how often did someone tell you what it is to be a man? Or how often do people tell you what it is not to do to be a man? And so a lot of the red pill structure that has a lot of negativity that can happen is the first time a young man hears someone tell them something they can do to obtain manhood, to obtain a sense of control and pride. And so I teach them ways to look at this, like compensatory structures or like valuations that allow them to see new ways to find themselves. Because I remember as a young man, I was not the typical young man, and I wrestled and did soccer, so I fell into the categories that worked. And especially the wrestling brought me physical capital structures where like I could fight if I needed to. But the class I teach has been really successful. A lot of students, it's had the highest ratings because I use jokes, because as you know, with men, we're not going to open up until someone says something funny. And I also do not let them sit in something where they're not going to talk. The men who are in my class, you have to talk.
Got to participate.
Because there's this like silent contract. Shut the fuck up in a gender class and you'll get your grade. And I'm like, not in here. You stay quiet. You're tomorrow's target. And so I love teaching it. And it's one of the classes I'm glad that I get a chance to teach. Funny fact while we're signing off at the end, Clavicular, you may have heard of him.
Yeah, of course.
He showed up to my office.
No way.
I have a clip that is now going to go on to my class of him saying, Men Masculinity by McQueen. Sounds like a great class. He showed up to my office because one of my students was on his Kick stream and wrote a paper about him. And then he just wanted to meet the professor that would teach a class called Men Masculinity.
Wow. Yeah, he's
Keep
got
up the
a lot
good
of press. Yeah.
Keep up the good work, Professor. You're doing a lot of great things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is the third time we've had this guy on.
Trifecta.
This is the trifecta, baby.
How much is a field goal worth?
What's that?
How much is a field goal worth?
Like, are we talking soccer here or are we talking about football?
A field goal is football. It's appropriate. He's here
So
for
we're
the
bringing
third
on our guy, Nick Lowery, my man. There's been a lot to catch up on, believe it or not. Even though we may not see each other for a few weeks at a time, a month at a time, every time we see each other, there's something out. So how's the book going, man?
Book's going great. The Audible is coming out next week. 35% of the reading population prefer Audible, so you can get on Audible. The hardcover's out now. I just gave 150 books to Procter & Gamble. They have the only Metamucil factory in the world here. They make 2.5 billion doses of Metamucil, which is a lot of poop. And so I could have used another word as well. But I just wanted them to feel really good about the fact that they're helping put smiles on the faces of people all over the world with Metamucil. God bless Metamucil.
And by the way, he did a keynote. You keynoted that.
That was a keynote.
It's on Instagram. I saw it on your social. So if you haven't seen it, you can see a little snippet. It was very impressive. Number one is you're so real, man. Like you got the podium up there on the stage. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to sit right here and be at these people's level and just talk to them as humans. And that's one thing
important.
You do such a good job as a keynoter.
There are 130 factories for Procter & Gamble in the country, and this one has been sort of ignored. So I love the idea, which reminded me as I told them of the Kansas City Chiefs in 1989 when we only had 23,000 season tickets and a guy named Carl Peterson. And then Marty Schottenheimer came in and turned it around almost instantly, and we had a full stadium a year later and a full sense of being on a real team for the first time after a decade in the NFL. And so in that same context, turning around from worst to first, if you will, is really exciting to me. And so what I emphasized was all of us crave connection. You and I, Scott, we want to be connected in our conversations, right? I mean, life is so short. Why waste time in these vacant conversations in life? That's really what I wanted to make sure everybody understood was 260 of these factory workers on 4 different shifts, making sure that they feel connected to each other, but also they have a 70% mistake level where they have to stop the presses. And so we're going to go from worst to first. We're going to go from mistakes to efficiency, which is a great analogy for football, right? When you're more efficient, when Eric Bieniemy comes back to the Chiefs as the offensive coordinator, when we were great, then we lost that. With all due respect to Matt Nagy, he's a great guy. Eric Bieniemy will bring back that efficiency, and you watch the Chiefs offense with a little caveat that our offensive line needs to be better than it's been to protect Patrick Mahomes. But efficiency is everything. And when you know you're part of a great team, that's life. You wake up in the morning and the coffee tastes a little bit better. This is actually water. I'm going to pretend this is coffee.
What's it like?
Everything is better.
What's it like when your home stadium is only half full? What is that feeling when you go out there to play and you're giving it your all, and you've been giving it your all year? And, you know, for better or for worse, the crowd is just not there.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough, I think.
Well, you got to get over the high school thing. I need to be loved, you know, and just do the best job you can. Yeah. And so, yes, unfortunately, we didn't have many seasons where we were that full. We had some amazing individual games. Earl Campbell against Joe Delaney back in my second year in the league, and incredible 2 phenomenal running backs, full stadium, but not on a regular basis. And it's not just that, it's also the level of intensity, how much the fans are into it. Back then, maybe 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 would have a jersey. How everybody has a full, they have their own closet full of Chiefs stuff to wear, and the level of emotion. And you're seeing it in the World Cup, what that really means.
And the fans can impact the game.
The fans,
they really do.
Emotion is very important, because getting emotion allows you to get past the self-conscious state and really get closer to that level of flow where you're feeling all of your capacities. I was just hearing about Arrowhead Stadium and Lionel Messi scoring a hat trick and watching those goals. Those were not easy goals.
Yeah.
And the stadium was 90% Argentina. And my friends were telling me, you know, the Chiefs are very orderly. No one stands in the aisles. Security comes down and makes them move. But they had to abandon that in the game because the Argentine fans were sitting out there in the aisle and standing up, and because it's a religion.
Sure.
At an even deeper level for soccer, especially. It's only every 4 years. So we have the Super Bowl every year, but the World Cup's only every 4 years. And Argentina looked good. I think England is my favorite to win right now.
You feel good about the U.S. versus Australia?
And the U.S., I think, is going to, I think the U.S. should win.
And what about when we play Turkey?
I think we'll beat Turkey as well. The thing is, when a team has a really good game, in any sport, sometimes there's a little bit of, well, no, actually the opposite can happen too. Depending on how you play it, you can get confidence or you can get too confident. We just show up. I'm glad there's 6 days between the last game and this one. But what's great about England and hopefully the United States is it's not just the individual talent. You see that with a New York Yankees with great talent but not winning always, although they're doing pretty well this year. It's chemistry. You got to have the right kind of players there in the locker room. My friend Roger Clemens, when he was with the Yankees, I see why he was not only a great pitcher, but an incredible leader. He'd bring in his boombox into the locker room, and he'd play his tunes, and they'd do karaoke. Now, if there's one way to break down barriers and the egos, it's listen to a guy with a terrible voice, go ahead and sing anyway.
Just belt it out.
Because he's part of the team, and it creates that relaxed, confident, hey, we're all in this together. So Roger did that, creating that flow in the locker room. That does translate to the field.
So you're saying England or USA? Well, let's be clear.
Oh, England's better than the USA, although I think USA will give them a run for it.
Okay.
And you never know. I mean, USA hockey back in the day.
I hear you, man. So, hey, I want to brag on you a little bit, if you don't mind, because we're friends and I have the ability to do that. I got to be with you in Kansas City, and we went to a Royals game last month or April. It's been 6 weeks. This guy, people know who he is we have great seats. The general manager had hooked us up with some awesome seats, right? Shout out.
Thank you, Royals. We love you.
Thanks. Shout out to them. But at the end of the game, we're all trying to, get out of there at the end. We watched the whole game. It was an amazing game. But every single person that came up to him, every single person, we couldn't get him out of there. People were coming up, getting autographs, getting pictures. And it was like that at every single turn. The restaurant that we were the day before, when he was doing his book signing, it was no different. He was a man of the people, showed up, and the way that you're so loved by the people. And it was so cool for me to see at the local level. It's one thing you hear about it. You're like, oh, yeah, of course they love him in Kansas City, but to see it up close and personal, how do you manage that, though?
It's a long time since I played there, so it's extra gratitude, because in our culture today, if you didn't play in the last 2 years, they forget about you.
Right.
And then they introduced me on the stadium scoreboard at the Royal Stadium.
We got a video of it,
pretty
too.
darn cool. And I happened to be wearing my Chiefs jacket because I've been wearing that at the book signing. So I had a jean jacket, open it up like Superman, and there's my Chiefs jacket. And Royals fans are Chiefs fans too, and I'm just grateful to.
And you didn't know they were going to do that,
right?
You didn't know they were going to do that.
No, I didn't. They just came up. The cameraman came and said, "Hey, are you ready for? We're going to do this." So, and then I thought, how do I do this? I know. I'll just.
So we did it. So we had two camera angles. I had one. We were tag teaming. We had one video here and then one of the big screen, so you could actually see it in real time. It was so cool. It was a cool moment.
It was,
and
I appreciate your coming too. And,
yeah, that's great.
And then we had the roast. It really was the roast.
How did Mike do? How did Mike do in the roast?
Mike cried.
Yeah.
He, we all laughed. We cried.
I cut it short, man. Well, I told you I was nervous.
Was it intimidating?
I was intimidating. I was nervous, but I remember Christian Okoye, who we had lunch with that day, and I had talked to him after lunch, just privately, and I said, "Hey, man," he goes, "just keep it short." And I already had this thing that was like 6-7 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna have to get rid of all this stuff. And there was stuff in there about his dating life that I thought was funny. I even asked him of his people, and I'm like, yeah. But you just felt the vibe. The vibe was people want to be complimentary. They want to roast him. I mean, I don't think you got roasted too bad, to be honest.
Not at all.
I thought everyone got up there.
Duron Cherry and Emmanuel Cleaver.
Yeah, and true to form, the person that gets roasted always gets the microphone last. And he got to get up there at the end and acknowledge everybody. And he had a good, 12 minutes or so on stage to acknowledge the crowd.
It was great. And there was a tornado warning right outside. So I'm really grateful for the people that came. And then we had a lot of videos of teammates coming on saying really nice things, frankly. Steve DeBerg.
Steve DeBerg is hilarious.
Who is one of the funniest players I ever played with.
It's hilarious.
And one of the more underrated quarterbacks. He played and helped turn us around in the late 80s. We finally had somebody who knew how to read a defense and had a great arm and knew how to have fun too. No one in NFL history drank more than Steve DeBerg after the game or
after the game, not before the game or during, but after.
But yeah. What a great leader! What a great
witty,
guy.
Man. He's witty.
Really funny.
Neil was there too. He had Neil
Smith.
Neil Smith. That's a big man.
That's a
very big man.
Very long arms.
And he is such a sweetheart. He's like the teddy bear. Like the nicest. I mean, I wouldn't mess with the guy. He's a big guy, but you sit there and you talk to him one-on-one, and he's present with you. He doesn't know me from anybody. He's like, so tell me a little bit about what you do. And I'm like, wow, this guy actually asks questions and he's engaged. It's not one of those famous people. It's like, you want my autograph? Let's get a picture and move on. He was actually engaging. So I felt that from the whole city, man. The city just loves you out there, man.
Well, thank you. And Kansas City really does have what we call social capital. They really understand giving back. So it was a great weekend.
Yeah, that was good. That was awesome. So what do you got coming up? We've been sitting on all kinds of podcasts, local media. What do you got coming up?
I am very excited. I got a text from RFK Jr. yesterday, a call from him, and a guy named Jay Bhattacharya, who's the head of the CDC right now, poor guy, and the NIH. And the reason that's important is because BlueCloudX has an incredible contribution to the healthcare industry by basically reducing data variance around the world in clinical research. All of the qualifications that anybody has to have, you have to know that they are absolutely properly trained in consistent standards, whether it's in Nigeria, Indonesia, Africa, or the United States. And so they're very excited because we have 2.7 million healthcare workers in 198 countries, 550,000 doctors, and it keeps growing. And we're recognized now by the NIH for our work because by providing a currency or a standard to make sure that there isn't data variance and that there isn't what we saw too often in COVID, which was people that weren't qualified applying a mismanagement to medicine itself. But clinical research, right now, only 10% of hospitals take advantage of clinical research. And we can, if we increase that by 3%, that's a 30% increase that will greatly provide data that proves that new medicines, new drugs actually work and are properly vetted.
Yeah.
There's a mental health app, and anybody that wants to check it out is free. It's just Google the Nick Lowery companion app. It comes with BlueCloud, and it's the first personal app so that you don't have to report and expose your fears and the issues that we all have from time to time. You can work through this app. It's totally free, and it's based on 5 questions that were developed by Dr. Peter Wiemeyer from the University of Heidelberg over 15 years. But if you think about it, 75% of the population doesn't want to talk about their stuff. And of course, first responders, the military, the huge suicide rate, which I've been working on, are terrible. So how do you give people a way to express where they are, answer these questions that have to do with decision-making, socialization, self-awareness, planning, etc.? And I'm asking these questions. It feeds into an algorithm, and then it gives you a response based on your answers that time on where to put your mind. There's a lot of research that if we have a great mentor, and in some ways it's a companion app or a mentor, it says you might want to focus on this, etc. So imagine if in 2 years or sooner, maybe, the entire military has a Teams app, which we have, which allows for every single soldier from the beginning they enter the military and basic training all the way till the end of their career. You have a baseline, just like a baseline for concussions. When you have a baseline, you can tell and evaluate where they're at with suicidal ideation, with PTSD, with where they are in terms of mental health. And when they feed into the VA, which has not always been able to do its job, a lot of it having to do with being overwhelmed, frankly. They need to have twice the staff they do just for the numbers. But that makes a huge difference. If you've been able to follow somebody for 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, chances are they've been connected to combat as well and witnessed some not the best things. What a beautiful contribution. So I'm excited about this companion app, and it's free. It's $100 for the second level for a year. So it's like $8 a month. And you get magazine articles, videos, etc., sophisticated but also accessible information. Because in the end, just like the kicker, which we talked about in our first interview, the kicker runs on the field naked and alone, and how you manage those fears and those insecurities is everything. And by the way, there's not only the performance on the field, there's more importantly all the time off the field where you can be overwhelmed, you can get into dysfunctional relationships, or a dysfunctional relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
It's good. So the website to get the book,
NickLoweryBook.com. You can get the hard copy, you can get the paperback, and now you can get it on Audible as well.
Very
love it. Is that your voice?
Oh, yeah. It's my voice.
You did the whole thing?
Oh, yeah.
That's impressive.
Nick, he's not going to have a voice actor.
But a lot of people are doing the AI, though. They do the AI thing now.
And by the way, I've done this. I had Audible on my first book that I wrote. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard work to go in there and record yourself.
It's impressive,
saying these lines perfectly. It's not easy.
Keep your passion, too.
Yeah.
Lee Steinberg actually wrote the foreword and calls me the Leonardo da Vinci for our times. I'm thinking that's just a little bit of hyperbole. I mean, I know Donald Trump likes hyperbole. Lee Steinberg apparently does, too. But it's still, what a great compliment. And especially since I'm going to Italy in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And we'll trace the steps of the real Leonardo da Vinci.
Nick, I appreciate you coming in, man. I love you.
Always good to
You're
see
my
you.
guy.
Thanks, everybody. This has been another episode of the What's Your Story podcast. I'm Scott Leese. This is Mike Lindstrom. We will see you all in the next episode.
Hey, everyone. Mike Lindstrom here. Thanks for tuning in to What's Your Story with Mike and Scott. Make sure to hit the subscribe button for new episodes every Tuesday morning and check out a few of our previous episodes below. We'll see you next time.